Today, we are talking about the stories principle. So let's get into it. Let's just start with a quote from the book. You say, stories are the most powerful way we humans learn. Every community, like every person, is full of stories. Sharing certain stories deepens a community's connections. So let's start there. Talk a little bit about how stories can do this. How can stories deepen a community's connections?
Well, for example, when people are exploring a community and want to know if they want to join, be that a biking community or a podcaster's community or an author's community, they want to know, well, what do you all do? How is this helpful? What actually brings you all together such that you're not spending your time with other bikers or podcasters or authors? And the way we typically learn that is through stories. And that may be obvious. What's not obvious is how then people who are visiting, for example, can get those stories. Is there a place where those stories will be shared? Is there a resource where they can learn them? Is there a resource where people who are exploring because they're bikers or podcasters can find those stories to learn, oh, these are my people, and this is what makes this group of people different from any other group I could participate in. Also, once a group is already together and they're growing together and participating together, the stories help us understand who that group is for one another. That makes the group important whatsoever. So again, if there's no time where those stories can be shared, if there's no resource where those stories can be learned, there's a lot of opportunity to knit together those people around those shared values and purpose.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the different types of stories that we tell in community building. And you go through these in the book, starting with an origin story. And I think when I hear the term origin story, the first thing I always think of is superheroes. There's always that first movie that comes out where you learn the origin of Thor, or you learn the origin of Iron Man, or the origin of Superman, or whatever. But what do you mean when you talk about origin stories?
Well, it's actually very similar, Seth. What you already know about superheroes is it almost doesn't matter exactly what the powers of the superhero are, or said differently, what the possibilities of what they can do are. What matters more important is what formed them, what motivates them to do what they do. So there may be another character that has the strength of Spider-Man and can walk up walls and maybe even swing on webs. But if they're not motivated by the call to work on justice, because if, in the case of Peter Parker, he doesn't work on justice, kind, innocent people are going to get hurt. So he needs to risk his own safety in order to help people he does not yet know, then that character is not nearly as compelling as Spider-Man. So the same is true with a community. There may be a community of bicyclists or a community of podcasters, and maybe they have resources on how to podcast better or how to, grow stamina in bicycling. But we want to know, when we're thinking about why do I want to participate, what started this group of bicyclists or podcasters gathering? Is it because we all want to become rich as quickly as possible by podcasting and getting the biggest audiences possible, no matter what we have to put out? Or is the origin story about Seth understanding there was a lot of pain out there and wisdom he wanted to share for people looking for it and wanting to make it ever more available type thing? So the origin story will tell people who are seeking your community and people in it, what is the kernel of motivation that is motivating all of our activities together? And you might say, well, Charles, a lot of communities are gathering that had really ugly starts because they were from the early 20th century and they're really racist or they're about domination, but we don't do that anymore. Now it's really about supporting friends in the neighborhood. Fair enough. That's a story. There's a story about how we originally were gathered to be exclusive, or we originally started to make sure that we would dominate another group by banding together and sharing resources. But since then, there's been a change. Now we are different. Now we're much more inclusive, or now we're much more generous. So that's a story. And when we're inviting people to participate and we want them to ever more invest, then having them understand how we started and what we became makes a big difference on informing them, do they want to be a part of it and how much?
Is the idea here that the potential members, or once they become members, the members of a community somehow see themselves in the origin story, or a reflection of themselves, or a reflection of their values?
Exactly right. That the origin story syncs with their own values. So I know you enough, Seth, that I know you don't want to participate in a podcasting group that says, we started because we wanted to get as many viewers as possible, make as much money as possible, and learn how we can surf the trends of interest on the internet. You don't want to be making hat videos because hat videos are trending. It's just like, that's just not who you are. You want to share ideas that you think are going to help people, or doing things that you think are helpful in media. So an origin story that talks about, hey, there's this guy named Charles and he started a podcast. He didn't have a lot of traction. So he started tracking trends on Google, making episodes on whatever trend was coming up. And now he's a big podcaster. Like that's not going to interest you, even though it might technically be a podcasting community with podcasting lessons. In this case, that origin story would repel you until you found an origin story that resonated with your interest in creating media that's actually enriching people's lives, no matter what the trends were doing in the rest of the internet.
I'm actually thinking back to the superheroes as we're talking about this and sort of the difference in their origin story. I mean, Superman is from a planet that blew up and he's alone. There's nobody like him in his universe, which is different than, say, the Hulk, who, views his superpowers as a burden and wishes he didn't have it because he grows into this thing that he can't control, versus Peter Parker, who you mentioned, who is a teenager and just trying to grow up and be a normal teenager and so on and so forth. They're all just a little bit different. You can see why different people would identify with one over the others, and I can see why that would be the same thing in a community where the origin story becomes important and people want to find a community that they feel they identify with, or that shares their values.
I would say they're not a little bit different, Seth. I'd say they're radically different. And what we expect of them differs because of their motivations that stem from that origin story.